My father damaged my kitchen wall while claiming my nephews would be moving in with me even though I never agreed to it. Then I discovered my sister-in-law wanted to dump her kids every summer and my dad was planning to secretly leave them at my house without my consent. Hello everyone. My name is Alex, I'm 34 years old. And today I'm going to tell you about how my father damaged my kitchen wall while announcing that my nephews would be moving in with me for the summer, even though I had never agreed to this arrangement. And how I discovered a conspiracy between my dad and my sister-in-law to secretly dump her kids at my house without my consent. This is a story about family members who think they can make decisions about your life without asking, about boundaries being trampled, and about standing up for yourself when people try to volunteer you for responsibilities you never agreed to take on. I never imagined my own father would damage my property and try to force child care duties on me, but here we are. Let me start by explaining my family situation and how this absurd scenario came about. I'm single, child-free by choice, and I work as a software developer from home. I bought my first house about 2 years ago, a modest 3-bedroom place in a nice neighborhood, and I've been slowly fixing it up and making it my own. My brother Jason is married to my sister-in-law Denise, and they have 3 boys ages 7, 9, and 11. The boys are energetic and can be sweet kids, but they're also a handful, constantly running around, breaking things, and requiring constant supervision and attention. My relationship with my father has always been complicated. He's the kind of person who thinks he knows what's best for everyone and has no problem making decisions on other people's behalf without consulting them. He's been like this my whole life, volunteering me for things without asking, making commitments in my name, and generally treating my time and autonomy as less important than his vision of how things should be. As I've gotten older and more independent, I've tried to set boundaries with him, but he has a way of bulldozing right through them and acting offended when I push back. The incident that started this whole mess happened 3 weeks ago. My father had asked if he could come over to see the house and check out some of the renovations I'd been working on. I said yes, thinking it would be a normal visit where he'd look around, maybe offer some advice on my projects, and then leave. What I didn't expect was for him to show up with a sledgehammer and power tools, announcing that he was going to help me create a pass-through between my kitchen and dining room. I was immediately confused and said I didn't want to pass through, that I liked my kitchen and dining room as separate spaces. My father waved off my objection, saying that opening up the space would increase my home's value and make it more functional, especially now that I'd have the boys living with me. I stopped him mid-swing and asked what he meant by having the boys living with me. He looked at me like I was being dense and said that Jason and Denise's boys would be staying with me for the summer, that it had all been arranged. And that's why he wanted to open up the kitchen space so I'd have a better flow for dealing with 3 active kids. I was absolutely stunned. No one had asked me if I wanted to have my nephews stay with me for the summer. No one had even mentioned this possibility in conversation. My father was acting like this was a done deal, something I had obviously agreed to when I had never had a single conversation about it with anyone. I told him to stop what he was doing immediately, that there must be some misunderstanding because I had never agreed to have the boys stay with me. My father got defensive, saying that Jason and Denise needed help with child care over the summer, that I had a spare bedroom and worked from home so it made sense for me to take the boys, and that family helps family. He said he'd already told Jason and Denise that I would do it, that they were counting on me, and that I couldn't back out now. The audacity of him making this commitment on my behalf without ever asking me was breathtaking. I told him clearly that I would not be taking the boys for the summer, that I had my own work and my own life, that I had never been consulted about this arrangement, and that he had no right to volunteer me for months of child care without my consent. My father got angry, saying I was being selfish and that I owed it to my brother to help him out since I didn't have kids of my own and had the space. He actually said that since I'd chosen not to have children, the least I could do was help raise someone else's before I could respond to that infuriating statement. My father had already swung the sledgehammer at my kitchen wall, creating a hole about 2 feet in diameter. I yelled at him to stop, but he said he was just getting started and that I'd thank him later when I saw how much better the space looked. I physically got between him and the wall and told him he needed to leave my house immediately, that he had damaged my property without permission and was now trying to force me into a child care arrangement I hadn't agreed to. My father finally left, but not before saying I was being unreasonable and that we'd talk about this later when I'd calmed down and come to my senses. I was left standing in my kitchen looking at a massive hole in the wall, angry and confused about what had just happened. I immediately called my brother Jason to find out what was going on. Why Dad thought I'd agreed to take the boys for the summer, and who had decided this without talking to me. Jason sounded uncomfortable on the phone, saying that Dad had told him I'd offered to take the boys, that I'd been enthusiastic about it and was looking forward to having them. I told Jason that was completely false, that I had never offered any such thing and had never even been asked. There was a long pause, and then Jason admitted that he'd thought it was weird that I'd offered since I'd never shown interest in extended child care before. But Dad had been so insistent that I'd agreed that Jason had believed him. I asked Jason why he and Denise needed summer child care in the first place. Jason explained that Denise had been offered a promotion at her job that required her to travel frequently during the summer months, and they couldn't afford summer camps for all 3 boys. They'd been trying to figure out child care solutions when Dad had apparently volunteered me as the answer to their problem. Jason said he'd talk to Denise and they'd figure something else out, that he was sorry for the misunderstanding. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Over the next few days, I started getting calls from other family members asking why I was refusing to help Jason and Denise with the boys, why I was being so difficult when I had the space and the flexibility to help family. It became clear that my father had been spreading his version of events, where I had agreed to take the boys and was now backing out at the last minute, leaving Jason and Denise in a difficult position. I had to call multiple relatives and explain the actual situation, that I had never agreed to take the boys, that I had never even been asked until my father announced it as a done deal while trying to demolish my kitchen wall. Some relatives understood and apologized for believing Dad's story. Others seemed to think I should just take the boys anyway since they needed help, that my choice to be child-free meant I should be available to care for other people's children whenever needed. Then things got even more disturbing. I was having lunch with my cousin Emma, venting about the whole situation, when she mentioned that this wasn't the first time Denise had tried to arrange extended child care for her boys during the summer. Emma said that last year, Denise had asked if Emma could take the boys for 6 weeks, and when Emma had declined, Denise had asked several other relatives. Apparently, Denise had been vocal about wanting summers off from parenting, wanting time to herself without the constant demands of the kids. This information made me realize that my father's plan might have been more calculated than I'd initially thought. I decided to do some investigating, calling a few relatives that Emma mentioned Denise had approached about child care. What I discovered was disturbing. Denise had a pattern of trying to offload her kids for extended periods, particularly during school breaks. She'd tell people that Jason was working too much and she needed help, or that the boys needed to spend time with extended family, or various other excuses. When relatives would decline, she'd get angry and accuse them of not caring about the boys. I also learned from one of Jason's friends, who I ran into at a coffee shop, that Denise had been actively planning to have the boys gone for the entire summer. She'd apparently told multiple people about her plans for the summer that included travel, spa weekends, and time to focus on herself, all things that didn't include her children. The friend thought I already knew about this arrangement, mentioning casually that it must be nice for Denise to have secured free child care for 3 months. Armed with this information, I called my father directly and demanded to know what was really going on. Was this actually about Jason needing help with child care, or was this about Denise wanting to get rid of her kids for the summer and my father? volunteering me as the solution without my knowledge or consent. My father was defensive at first, insisting it was about helping family, but eventually he admitted that Denise had asked him for help finding summer child care, and he'd thought of me as the perfect solution since I worked from home and didn't have kids of my own. I asked my father point blank if he had ever actually planned to ask me if I was willing to take the boys, or if he had always intended to just present it as a done deal that I couldn't back out of. His silence was telling. Eventually, he admitted that he'd thought if he told everyone I'd already agreed, including telling me that Jason and Denise were counting on me, I'd feel too guilty to refuse. He actually thought ambushing me with a fake commitment was a better strategy than having an honest conversation and risking that I might say no. I was furious. My own father had orchestrated a scheme to trap me into 3 months of full-time child care for my nephews, had damaged my property as part of this scheme, and had lied to multiple family members about my involvement. I told him that his behavior was manipulative and completely unacceptable, that he owed me an apology and money to repair the hole in my wall, and that he needed to tell everyone the truth about what had actually happened. My father refused to apologize, saying he'd been trying to help everyone and I was being stubborn and selfish. He said the boys needed somewhere to go and I was the logical choice, that I should be grateful he'd thought of a way for me to contribute to the family. The fact that he saw manipulating me into unwanted child care as a contribution I should be grateful for showed how little he respected my autonomy or boundaries. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I sent a detailed email to Jason, Denise, and all the relatives who had been calling me about the situation. I explained exactly what had happened, that I had never agreed to take the boys, that I had never been asked, that my father had made this commitment on my behalf without my knowledge or consent, and that he had admitted to me that this was a deliberate strategy to pressure me into accepting a responsibility I didn't want. I also mentioned what I'd learned about Denise's pattern of trying to arrange extended child care so she could have time away from her kids. The response to my email was mixed. Jason called me apologizing profusely, saying he'd had no idea that Denise had been planning this or that Dad had lied about my involvement. He sounded genuinely shocked and hurt by what I'd revealed. Denise, on the other hand, was furious. She sent me a scathing email saying I had no right to judge her parenting or her need for breaks, that I couldn't understand what it was like to be a mother since I'd chosen not to have children, and that I'd ruined her summer plans by exposing the situation. My father sent me a text saying I'd made a huge mistake by sending that email, that I'd embarrassed Denise and caused problems in Jason's marriage, and that I'd damaged family relationships that would be hard to repair. I responded that he had damaged family relationships when he lied and manipulated people, that Denise had damaged her own reputation by trying to dump her kids on relatives without being honest about her motivations, and that I would not be taking responsibility for simply telling the truth about what had happened. Several relatives reached out to express support for my position, saying they'd felt uncomfortable with Dad's story from the beginning and were glad to know the truth. A few said they'd had similar experiences with Denise trying to arrange child care, under false pretenses and feeling guilty for declining. One cousin even said she'd taken Denise's kids for 2 weeks last summer under the impression it was an emergency, only to see Facebook posts of Denise on vacation at a resort during that time. Jason and Denise's relationship became strained as this all came out. Jason apparently confronted Denise about her pattern of trying to offload the kids, about her summer plans that didn't include them, about whether she'd been honest with him about her motivations and feelings about parenting. I don't know all the details of their conversations, but Jason mentioned to me that they were in couples counseling trying to work through issues that my email had brought to the surface. As for my father, our relationship has been severely damaged. He still hasn't apologized for lying, for damaging my wall, or for trying to manipulate me into 3 months of child care. He maintains that he was trying to help solve a family problem and I'm being vindictive by holding a grudge. He's told other family members that I overreacted and that the email I sent was cruel and unnecessary. His complete inability to acknowledge that what he did was wrong or to respect my boundaries has made it clear that I need significant distance from him. I hired a contractor to properly repair the hole in my kitchen wall, which cost me $800. I sent my father the bill, but he refused to pay it, saying it was my fault for stopping him before he could finish the project. I considered small claims court, but ultimately decided the $800 wasn't worth the additional family drama it would cause. I paid for the repair myself and considered it the price of clarity about my father's character and the boundary I needed to maintain with him. The situation with my nephews resolved itself in an unexpected way. Jason's mother, Denise's mother-in-law, heard about what happened and offered to have the boys stay with her for 6 weeks of the summer. She said she'd been wanting more time with her grandsons anyway, and this seemed like a good solution. Denise wasn't entirely happy about this, apparently having hoped for a different kind of summer for herself, but Jason was relieved to have childcare sorted out in a way that didn't involve manipulation or pressure. I've set very firm boundaries with my father since this incident. He's not allowed to come to my house without advance notice and explicit permission. He's not allowed to volunteer me for anything without checking with me first, and he's on notice that if he damages my property again or tries to manipulate me into unwanted commitments, I will pursue legal remedies without hesitation. He claims these boundaries are too harsh and that I'm punishing him for trying to help, but I've learned that with someone like my father who has no respect for consent or autonomy, you have to be extremely clear and firm or they will continue to steamroll right over you. As for Denise, I now have a much clearer understanding of who she is and what she prioritizes. I love my nephews, but I also recognize that their mother has some troubling attitudes about parenting and about using family members as free child care without being honest about her motivations. My relationship with Jason has remained intact because he was willing to listen and address the issues once they were brought to light, but my relationship with Denise is cordial at best. Looking back on this situation, I'm glad I stood my ground and refused to be manipulated into taking on a responsibility I never agreed to. It would have been easier in some ways to just accept the situation, to take the boys for the summer rather than cause family conflict, but it would have also established a terrible precedent. It would have shown my father and Denise that they could make decisions about my life without my input, that manipulating and pressuring me was an effective strategy, and that I would ultimately cave to family pressure rather than maintain my boundaries. The hole in my kitchen wall, now properly repaired, has become a sort of reminder to me about the importance of boundaries and the lengths some people will go to in order to get what they want without having to ask for it honestly. My father tried to literally break down a wall as part of his scheme to pressure me into child care, which is almost poetically appropriate for someone who has spent his life trying to break down my boundaries and autonomy. For anyone dealing with family members who try to volunteer you for responsibilities without asking, who make commitments in your name without your consent, or who use manipulation and pressure instead of honest communication, I want you to know that you have every right to say no. You don't owe anyone your time, your space, or your labor just because they've decided you should provide it. Family relationships should be based on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation, not coercion and manipulation, and specifically for anyone who is child-free by choice. You do not owe child care to family members with kids just because you don't have children of your own. Your decision not to have kids means you don't want the responsibilities and commitments that come with parenting, and that includes parenting other people's children for extended periods. Yes, it's nice to help family when you genuinely want to and can, but you are not obligated to provide free child care, and you are not selfish for declining when the responsibility doesn't fit your life or desires. My name is Alex. I'm 34 years old. And this is my story of how my father damaged my kitchen wall while announcing that my nephews would be moving in with me without my consent. How I discovered a conspiracy between him and my sister-in-law to secretly dump her kids at my house. And how I stood up for myself by exposing the truth and maintaining firm boundaries. It's been 3 weeks since this all exploded, and while some family relationships have been damaged, I'm at peace with how I handled it. I protected my autonomy, my boundaries, and my right to make my own decisions about my life and my home. The wall is fixed, the truth is out, and I'm moving forward with much clearer understanding of who respects me and who doesn't. Thank you for listening to my story.